Good evening, friends, and welcome to Sleepy Time Tales, a podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. Do you find your mind troubled with the stresses of modern life, especially when the lights are out and you're trying to get a restful night? Does your spinning mind keep you awake? Follow my voice down the path towards a good night's rest. Listen to me tell a story that will keep your mind from wandering to your daytime problems, the ones you can't solve right now and will be easier to solve well rested. Listen to my voice and allow yourself to drift, following the twists and turns of the story, but slowly letting go and drifting into sleep. Let my voice wash over you at a comfortable volume and allow yourself to be distracted from the stresses and worries that play on your mind. Whether you need help falling asleep or going back to sleep in the middle of the night, you can trust me to keep you company and help you to wake up tomorrow in a rested state. You may need to try out Sleepy Time Tales for a few nights to get used to this slightly strange idea, but I believe it will be well worth your while. I'm here to work with you, to create a safe space, a cocoon in which you can curl up and allow nature to take its course. So settle down, relax, and allow yourself to get lost in my telling of tonight's story. Before we get to tonight's reading, I'd like to ask for a couple of minutes of your time. Sleepy Time Tales is a purely listener-supported podcast. I can only keep it going, pay for the services and tools I use, and justify the time that I spend on it thanks to the generosity of listeners like you. So if you're finding Sleepy Time Tales useful, if it helps you to get a restful night and you would like to keep it going out to thousands of your fellow insomniacs, please consider supporting it on the Patreon at patreon.com/sleepytimetales. This is monthly support that not only helps me keep the lights on, but can get you fun bonuses based on your contribution level. So go along there, take a look, and sign up if you're interested. Of course, if monthly is a big ask, which is completely understandable, you can make once-off tips to the tip jar on the website, and you can help Sleepy Time Tales out without having to do so financially, but just telling people about it. If you know someone who's struggling to sleep, let them know where to find the show and see where it goes from there. Thank you very much. We're getting back to the blazing world, where the Empress and the Duchess travel to our world, and then there's an appeal to fortune to try to turn the Duchess's husband's life around, which is all quite as strange as it sounds. We return this week to the description of a new world called the Blazing World by the Duchess of Newcastle, Margaret Cavendish. At last, when the Duchess saw that no patterns would do her any good in the framing of her world, she was resolved to make a world of her own invention, and this world was composed of sensitive and rational self-moving matter. Indeed, it was composed only of the rational, which is the subtlest and purest degree of matter. For as the sensitive did move and act both to the perceptions and consistency of the body, so this degree of matter at the same point of time. For though the degrees are mixed, yet the several parts may move several ways at one time, did move to the creation of the imaginary world, which world after it was made, appeared so curious and full of variety, so well ordered and wisely governed, that it cannot possibly be expressed by words, nor the delight and pleasure which the Duchess took in making this world of her own. In the meantime, the Empress was also making and dissolving several worlds in her own mind, and was so puzzled that she could not settle in any of them. Wherefore she sent for the Duchess, who being ready to wait on the Empress, carried her beloved world along with her, and invited the Empress's soul to observe the frame, order, and government of it. Her Majesty was so ravished with the perception of it, that her soul desired to live in the Duchess's world. But the Duchess advised her to make such another world in her own mind. For, said she, your Majesty's mind is full of rational corporeal motions, and the rational motions of my mind shall assist you by the help of sensitive expressions, with the best instructions they are able to give you. The Empress, being thus persuaded by the Duchess to make an imaginary world of her own, followed her advice, and after she had quite finished it, and framed all kinds of creatures proper and useful for it, strengthened it with good laws, and beautified it with the arts and sciences. Having nothing else to do, unless she did dissolve her imaginary world, or made some alterations in the blazing world she lived in, which yet she could hardly do. By reason it was so well ordered that it could not be mended, for it was governed without secret and deceiving policy. Neither was there any ambitious factions, malicious distractions, civil dissensions, or home-bred quarrels, divisions in religion, foreign wars, etc. But all the people lived in a peaceful society, united tranquility and religious conformity. She was desirous to see the world the Duchess came from, and observe therein the several foreign governments, laws, and customs of several nations. The Duchess used all the means she could to divert her from that journey, telling her that the world she came from was very much disturbed with factions, divisions, and wars. But the Empress would not be persuaded from her design, unless the Emperor or any of his subjects should know of her travel and obstruct her design. She sent for some of the spirits she had formerly conversed withal, and inquired whether none of them could supply the place of her soul in her body at such a time, when she was gone to travel into another world. They answered yes, they could, for not only one, said they, but many spirits may enter into your body if you please. The Empress replied she desired but one spirit to be viceroy of her body in the absence of her soul, but it must be an honest and ingenious spirit, and if it was possible, a female spirit. The spirits told her that there were no difference of sexes amongst them, but said they, we will choose an honest and ingenious spirit, and such a one as shall so resemble your soul, that neither the Emperor nor any of his subjects, although most divine, shall know whether it be your own soul or not, which the Empress was very glad at. And after the spirits were gone, asked the Duchess how her body was supplied in the absence of her soul, who answered Her Majesty that her body in the absence of her soul was governed by her sensitive and rational corporeal motions. Thus these two female souls travelled together as lightly as two thoughts into the Duchess her native world, and, which is remarkable, in a moment viewed all the parts of it, and all the actions of all the creatures therein. Especially did the Empress's soul take much notice of the several actions of humane creatures in all the several nations and parts of that world, and wondered that for all there were so many several nations, governments, laws, religions, opinions, etc., they should all yet so generally agree in being ambitious, proud, self-conceited, vain, prodigal, deceitful, envious, malicious, unjust, revengeful, irreligious, factious, etc. She did also admire that not any particular state, kingdom, or commonwealth was contented with their own shares, but endeavored to encroach upon their neighbors, and that the greatest glory was in plunder and slaughter, and yet their victories less than their expenses, and their losses more than their gains, but their being overcome, in a manner, their utter ruin. But that she wondered most was that what they should prize, or value dirt more than men's lives, and vanity more than tranquility. For the Emperor of a world, said she, enjoys but a part, not the whole, so that his pleasure consists in the opinions of others. It is strange to me, answered the Duchess, that you should say thus, being yourself an Empress of a world, and not only of a world, but of a peaceable, quiet, and obedient world. "'Tis true," replied the Empress, "but although it is a peaceable and obedient world, yet the government thereof is rather a trouble than a pleasure, for order cannot be without industry, contrivance, and direction. Besides, the magnificent state that great princes keep or ought to keep is troublesome." "Then by your Majesty's discourse," said the Duchess, "I perceive that the greatest happiness in all the worlds consists in moderation." No doubt of it, replied the Empress. And after these two souls had visited all the several places, congregations, and assemblies, both in religion and state, the several courts of judicature and the lights in several nations, the Empress said that of all the monarchs of the several parts of the world, she had observed the Grand Signior was the greatest, for his word was a law and his power absolute. But the Duchess prayed the Empress to pardon her that she was of another mind. For, said she, he cannot alter Mahomet's law and religion, so that the law and church do govern the Emperor, and not the Emperor them. But, replied the Empress, he has power in some particulars, as, for example, to place and displace subjects in their particular governments of church and state. And having that, he has the command both over church and state, and none dares oppose him. 'Tis true, said the Justice, but if it pleases your Majesty, we will go into that part of the world whence I came to wait on your Majesty, and there you shall see as powerful a monarch as the Grand Signior. For all those are dominions and not of so large an extent, yet they are much stronger, for his laws are easy and safe, and he governs so justly and wisely, that his subjects are the happiest people of all the nations or parts of the world. This monarch, said the Empress, I have a great mind to see. Then they both went, and in a short time arrived into his dominions. But coming into the metropolitan city, the Empress's soul observed many gallants go into her house, and inquiring of the Duchess's soul what house that was, she told her it was one of the theatres where comedies and tragedies were acted. The Empress asked whether they were real. No, said the Duchess, they are feigned. Then the Empress desired to enter into the theatre, and when she had seen the play that was asked, the Duchess asked her how she liked the recreation. I like it very well, said the Empress. I observe that the actors make a better show than the spectators, and the scenes are better than the actors, and the music and dancing is more pleasant and acceptable than the play itself. For I see the scenes stand for wit, the dancing for humour, and the music is the chorus. I'm sorry, replied the Duchess, to hear your Majesty say so. For if the wits of this part of the world should hear you, they would condemn you. What, said the Empress, would they condemn me for preferring a natural face before a signpost, or natural humour before an artificial dance, or music before a true and profitable relation? As for relation, replied the Duchess, our poets defy and condemn it into a chimney corner, fitter for old women's tales than theatres. Why, said the Empress, do not your poets' actions comply with their judgments? For their plays are composed of old stories, either of Greek or Roman or some new-found world. The Duchess answered her Majesty that it was true, that all or most of these plays were taken out of old stories. But yet they had new actions, which being joined to old stories, together with the addition of new prologues, scenes, music, and dancing, made new plays. After this, both the souls went to the court, where all the royal family was together, attended by the chief of the nobles of their dominions, which made a very magnificent show. And when the soul of the Empress viewed the king and queen, she seemed to be in a maze, which the Duchess's soul perceiving, asked the Empress how she liked the king, the queen, and all the royal race. She answered that in all the monarchs she had seen in the world, she had not found so much majesty and affability mixed so exactly together, that none did overshadow or eclipse the other. And as for the queen, she said that virtue sat triumphant in her face, and piety was dwelling in her heart, and that all the royal family seemed to be imbued with a divine splendor. But when she had heard the king discourse, she believed that Mercury and Apollo had been his celestial instructors, and my dear lord and husband, added the Duchess, has been his earthly governor. But after some short stay in the court, the Duchess's soul grew very melancholy, the Empress asking the cause of her sadness. She told her that she had an extreme desire to converse with the soul of her noble lord and dear husband, and that she was impatient of a longer stay. The Empress desired the Duchess to have but patience so long, until the king, the queen, and the royal family were retired, and then she would bear her company to her lord and husband's soul, who at the time lived in the country some 112 miles off, which he did, and thus these two souls went towards those parts of the kingdom where the Duke of Newcastle was. But one thing I forgot all this while, which is, that although thoughts are the natural language of souls, yet by reason souls cannot travel without vehicles. They use such language as the nature and propriety their vehicles require, and the vehicles of those two souls being made of purest and finest sort of air, and of a human shape. This purity and fineness was the cause that they could neither be seen nor heard by any human creature, whenas they had been of some grosser sort of air, the sound of the air's language would have been as perceptible as the blowing of zephyrs. And now to return to my former story, when the Empress's and Duchess's soul were travelling into Nottinghamshire, for that was the place where the Duke did reside. Passing through the forest of Sherwood, the Empress's soul was very much delighted with it, as being a dry, plain, and woody place, very pleasant to travel in, both the winter and summer, for it is neither much dirty nor dusty at no time. At last they arrived at Welbeck, a house where the Duke dwelled, surrounded all with wood, so close and full that the Empress took great pleasure and delight therein, and told the Duchess she had never observed more wood in so little compass in any part of the kingdom she had passed through. The truth is, said she, there seems to be more wood on the seas, she meaning the ships, than on the land. The Duchess told her the reason was that there had been a long civil war in that kingdom, in which most of the best timber trees and principal palaces were ruined and destroyed. And my dear lord and husband, said she, had lost by it half his woods, besides many houses, land, and movable goods, so that all the loss out of his particular estate did amount to above £500,000. I wish, said the Empress, they had some of the gold that is in the blazing world, to repair his losses. The Duchess most humbly thanked her Imperial Majesty for her kind wishes, but, said she, wishes will not repay his ruins. However, God has given my noble lord and husband great patience, by which he bears all his losses and misfortunes. As last they entered into the Duke's house, an habitation not so magnificent as useful, and when the Empress saw it, Has the Duke, said she, no other house but this? Yes, answered the Duchess. Some 5 miles from this place he has a very fine castle called Bolsover. That place then, said the Empress, I desire to see. Alas, replied the Duchess, it is but a naked house, and unclothed of all furniture. However, said the Empress, I may see the manner of its structure and building. That you may, replied the Duchess, and as they were thus discoursing, the Duke came out of his house into the court, to see his horses of manage, whom when the Duchess's soul perceived, she was so overjoyed, that her aerial vehicle became so splendorous, as if it had been enlightened by the sun, by which we may perceive that the passions of souls or spirits can alter their bodily vehicles. Then these two ladies' spirits went close to him, but he could not perceive them. And after the Empress had observed that art of mange, she was much pleased with it, and commended it as a noble pastime, and an exercise fit and proper for noble and heroic persons. But the Duke was gone into the house again. Those two souls followed him, where the Empress observing that he went to the exercise of the sword, and was such an excellent and unparalleled master thereof. She was as much pleased with that exercise as she was with the former. But the Duchess's soul being troubled, that her dear lord and husband used such a violent exercise before meat, for fear of overheating himself, without any consideration of the Empress's soul, left her aerial vehicle and entered into her lord. The Empress's soul, perceiving this, did the like, and then the Duke had 3 souls in one body, and had there been some such souls more, the Duke would have been like the Grand Signior in his seraglio, only it would have been a Platonic seraglio. But the Duke's soul being wise, honest, witty, complacent, and noble, afforded such delight and pleasure to the Empress's soul by his conversation, that these 2 souls became enamored of each other, which the Duchess's soul perceiving grew jealous at first, but then considering that no adultery could be committed amongst Platonic lovers, and that Platonism was divine, as being derived from divine Plato, cast forth of her mind that idea of jealousy. Then the conversation of these 3 souls was so pleasant that it cannot be expressed. For the Duke's soul entertained the Empress's soul with scenes, songs, and music, witty discourses, pleasant recreations, and all kinds of harmless sports, so that the time passed away faster than they expected. At last a spirit came and told the Empress that although neither the Emperor nor any of his subjects knew that her soul was absent, yet the Emperor's soul was so sad and melancholy for want of his own beloved soul, that all the imperial court took notice of it. Wherefore he advised the Empress's soul to return into the blazing world, into her own body she left there, which both the Duke's and Duchess's soul was very sorry for, and wished that, if it had been possible, the Empress's soul might have stayed a longer time with them. But seeing it could not be otherwise, they pacified themselves. But before the Empress returned into the blazing world, the Duchess desired a favour of her, to wit that she would be pleased to make an arrangement between her noble lord and Fortune. Why, said the Empress, are they enemies? Yes, answered the Duchess, and they have been so ever since I have been his wife. Nay, I have heard my lord say that she hath crossed him in all things, ever since he could remember. I am sorry for that, replied the Empress, but I cannot discourse with Fortune without the help of an immaterial spirit, and that cannot be done in this world, for I have no fly nor birdmen here to send into the region of air, where for the most part their habitations are. The Duchess said she would entreat her lord to send an attorney or lawyer to plead his cause. Fortune will bribe them, replied the Empress, and so the Duke may chance to be cast. Wherefore the best way will be for the Duke to choose a friend on his side, and let Fortune choose another, and try whether by this means it would be possible to compose the difference. The Duchess said, they will never come to an agreement, unless there be a judge or umpire to decide the case. A judge, replied the Empress, is easy to be had, but to get an impartial judge is a thing so difficult that I doubt we shall hardly find one. For there is none to be had, neither in nature nor in hell, but only from heaven. And how to get such a divine and celestial judge I cannot tell. Nevertheless, if you will go along with me into the blazing world, I'll try what may be done. 'Tis my duty, said the Duchess, to wait on your Majesty, and I shall most willingly do it, for I have no other interest to consider. Then the Duchess spake to the Duke concerning the difference between him and Fortune, and how it was her desire that they might be friends. The Duke answered that for his part he had always with great industry sought her friendship, but as yet he could never obtain it, for she had always been his enemy. However, said he, I'll try and send my 2 friends, Prudence and Honesty, to plead my cause. Then these 2 friends went with the Duchess and the Empress into the blazing world, for it is to be observed that they are somewhat like spirits, because they are immaterial, although their actions are corporeal. And after their arrival there, when the Empress had refreshed herself and rejoiced with the Emperor, she sent her flymen for some of the spirits, and desired their assistance to compose the difference between Fortune and the Duke of Newcastle. But they told Her Majesty that Fortune was so inconstant that although she would perhaps promise to hear their cause pleaded, yet it was 1,000 to 1 whether she would ever have patience to do it. Nevertheless, upon Her Majesty's request, they tried their utmost, and at last prevailed with Fortune so far that she chose folly and rashness for her friends. But they could not agree in choosing a judge, until at last with much ado they concluded that truth should hear and decide the cause. Thus all being prepared and the time appointed, both the Empress and Duchess's soul went to hear them plead. And when all the immaterial company was met, Fortune, standing upon a golden globe, made this following speech. Noble friends, we are met here to hear a cause pleaded concerning the difference between the Duke of Newcastle and myself. And though I am willing upon the persuasions of the ambassadors of the Empress, the immaterial spirits, to yield to it, yet it had been fit the Duke's soul should be present also to speak for herself. But since she is not here, I shall declare myself to his wife, and his friends, as also to my friends, especially the Empress, to whom I shall chiefly direct my speech. First, I desire your Imperial Majesty may know that this Duke who complains or exclaims so much against me hath always been my enemy, for he has preferred honesty and prudence before me, and slighted all my favours. Nay, not only thus, but he did fight against me, and preferred his innocence before my power. His friends' honesty and prudence, said he most scornfully, are more to be regarded than inconstant Fortune, who is only a friend to fools and knaves, for which neglect and scorn, whether I have not just reason to his enemy, your Majesty may judge yourself. After Fortune had thus ended her speech, the Duchess's soul rose from her seat, and spake to the immaterial assembly in this manner. Noble friends, I think it fit, by your leave, to answer Lady Fortune in the behalf of my noble lord and husband, since he is not here himself, and since you have heard her complaint concerning the choice my lord made of his friends, and the neglect and disrespect he seemed to cast upon her. Give me leave to answer that, first, concerning the choice of his friends, he has proved himself a wise man in it. And as for the disrespect and rudeness of her ladyship accuses him of, I dare say he is so much a gentleman, that I am confident he would never slight, scorn, or disrespect any of the female sex in all his lifetime, but was such a servant and champion for them, that he ventured life and estate in their service. But being of an honest as well as an honourable nature, he could not trust Fortune with that which he preferred above his life, which was his reputation. By reason Fortune did not side with those that were honest and honourable, but renounced them. And since he could not be of both sides, he chose to be of that which was agreeable both to his conscience, nature, and education, for which choice Fortune did not only declare herself his open enemy, but fought with him in several battles, nay, many times hand to hand. At last she, being a powerful princess, and as some believe a deity, overcame him, and cast him into a banishment, where she kept him in great misery, ruined his estate, and took away from him most of his friends. Nay, even when she favoured many that were against her, she still frowned on him, all which she endured with the greatest patience. And with that respect to Lady Fortune, that he did never in the least endeavour to disoblige any of her favourites, but was only sorry that he, an honest man, could find no favour in her court. And since he did never injure any of those she favoured, he neither was an enemy to her ladyship, but gave her always that respect and worship which belonged to her power and dignity, and is still ready at any time honestly and prudently to serve her. He only begs her ladyship would be his friend for the future, as she hath been his enemy in times past. As soon as the Duchess's speech was ended, folly and rashness started up, and both spake so thick and fast at once, that not only the assembly, but themselves were not able to understand each other. At which Fortune was somewhat out of countenance, and commanded them either to speak singly or be silent. But Prudence told her ladyship she should command them to speak wisely, as well as singly. Otherwise, said she, it were best for them not to speak at all. Which Fortune resented very ill, and told Prudence she was too bold, and then commanded Folly to declare what she would have made known. But her speech was so foolish, mixed with such nonsense, that none knew what to make of it. Besides, it was so tedious that Fortune bid her to be silent, and commanded Rashness to speak for her, who began after this manner. Great Fortune, the Duchess of Newcastle, has proved herself, according to report, a very proud and ambitious lady, in presuming to answer you her own self, in this noble assembly without your command, in a speech wherein she did not only contradict you, but preferred honesty and prudence before you, saying that her lord was ready to serve you honestly and prudently, which presumption is beyond all pardon. And if you allow honesty and prudence to be above you, none will admire, worship, or serve you, but you'll be forced to serve yourself and will be despised, neglected, and scorned by all. And from a deity become a miserable, dirty, begging mortal in a churchyard porch or nobleman's gate. Wherefore, to prevent such disasters, fling as many misfortunes and neglects on the Duke and Duchess of Newcastle, and their two friends, as your power is able to do. Otherwise, prudence and honesty will be the chief and only moral deities of mortals. Rashness having thus ended her speech, Prudence rose and declared herself in this manner. Beautiful Truth, great Fortune, and you the rest of my noble friends, I'm come a long and long journey in the behalf of my dear friend, the Duke of Newcastle. Not to make more wounds, but if it be possible to heal those that are made already. Neither do I presume to be a deity, but my only request is that you would be pleased to accept of my offering. I, being a humble and devout supplicant, and since no offering is more acceptable to the gods than the offering of peace, in order to that I desire to make an agreement between Fortune and the Duke of Newcastle. Thus she spake, and as she was going up started Honesty, for she has not always so much discretion as she ought to have, and interrupted Prudence. I came not here, said she, to hear Fortune flattered, but to hear the cause decided between Fortune and the Duke. Neither came I hither to speak rhetorically and eloquently, but to propound the case plainly and truly. And I'll have you know that the Duke, whose cause we argue, was and is my foster son. For I, Honesty, bred him from his childhood, and made a perpetual friendship betwixt him and gratitude, charity, and generosity, and put him to school to Prudence, who taught him wisdom, and informed him in the rules of temperance, patience, justice, and the like. Then I put him into the University of Honor, where he learned all honorable qualities, arts, and sciences. Afterward I made him to travel through the world of actions, and made observation his governor, and in those his travels he contracted a friendship with experience, all of which made him fit for heaven's blessings and fortune's favors. But she, hating all those that have merit and desert, became his inveterate enemy, doing him all the mischief she could until the God of justice opposed Fortune's malice, and pulled him out of those ruins she had cast upon him. For this God's favourites were the Duke's champions, wherefore to be an enemy to him were to be an enemy to the God of justice. In short, the true cause of Fortune's malice to this Duke is that he would never flatter her, for I, Honesty, did command him not to do it, or else he would be forced to follow all her inconstant ways and obey all her unjust commands, which would cause a great reproach to him. But on the other side, prudence advised him not to despise fortune's favours, for that would be an obstruction and hindrance to his worth and merit. And he, to obey both our advice and counsels, did neither flatter nor despise her, but was always humble and respectful to her, so far as honour, honesty, and conscience would permit, all of which I refer to truth's judgment, and expect her final sentence. Fortune, hearing thus honesty's plain speech, thought it very rude, and would not hearken to truth's judgment, but went away in a passion. At which both the Empress and Duchess were extremely troubled, that their endeavours should have no better effect. But honesty chid the Duchess, and said she was to be punished for desiring so much fortune's favours. For it appears, said she, that you mistrust the God's blessings. At which the Duchess wept, answering honesty, that she did neither mistrust the God's blessings nor rely upon fortune's favours, but desired only that her lord might have no potent enemies. The Empress, being much troubled to see her weep, told honesty in anger she wanted the discretion of prudence. For though you are commended, said she, yet you are apt to commit many indiscreet actions, unless prudence be your guide. At which reproof prudence smiled, and honesty was somewhat out of countenance. But they soon became very good friends, and after the Duchess's soul had stayed some time with the Empress in the blazing world, she begged leave of her to return to her lord and husband, which the Empress granted her, upon condition she should come and visit her as often as conveniently she could, promising she would do the same to the Duchess. And with the goodbye of the Duchess, I think it's time to call it a night. As always, you can find the original on Project Gutenberg at the link in the show notes. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of Sleepy Time Tales, the podcast designed around a bedtime story to help you to get a restful night. New episodes will be released every Sunday night to give you something fresh to help you rest in a new week. But make sure to follow or subscribe in whatever service you use, so that you get your new episodes whenever they come out. Good night, and sweet dreams.